Great. Yosefa, what I think we should what we should start with, I was taking some notes of a lot of questions. There's, I think, nearly 100 questions asked during the presentation. Broke them down to topics. The two biggest topics that cover about half of the questions are, I think, telecommuting, people working in the US or working in Israel for US companies, kind of addressing a lot of sub questions within that. And also a lot of questions about IRAs, 401ks, Roth IRAs. So I think maybe we should first just kind of, and we did, a lot of questions came in and then we talked, maybe we answered them, but I think those were the two main points that people asked a lot about. So I suggest let's kind of, maybe Yosefa, you want to pick one and just talk a little bit about it. And then I jotted down in a shared doc, I could answer some specific questions people had, or I could try to, after you summarize it,
Sure.
target a few specific questions.
Yeah. Well, I saw a lot of questions about selling properties, so we could address that first. Um, so it doesn't matter if you purchase a property right away in Israel, that's not going to change the taxes. If you are a new Ola within your first 10 years, under the current law, as far as I understand, you don't need to report the sale of your US property to Israel. And even once you're living in Israel, you can still use the main home sale exemption for the IRS. So that usually requires that you live in the property for at least 2 years out of the 5 years immediately before selling. So basically the clock is ticking, assuming you've lived there at least 2 years, the clock is ticking from the date you move out. You likely will want to sell it within 3 years. To claim any exemption from that. Anything to add to that, Allie?
I do think there's also a question someone asked. There's no special rule though. If you sell your, as Yosefa mentioned, there's the primary residence exemption, but if you sell your residence in the US and you buy a newer, more expensive residence in Israel, you cannot, there's no exemption because you're selling one and buying another one. The exemption is what Yosefa mentioned, the 250 per person. The fact that you're buying a new, more expensive property in Israel doesn't give you a tax break or anything.
Right. What do you want to get next?
So the telecommuting, the commuting work, and maybe we hopefully answered some of these because we talked a bit about it. But the idea is, I'll take a couple of questions, try to answer them together. People asked kind of, making out this summer, I work as a consultant at 1099. How will I work as a contractor, not as W-2? Or I'm working online for all the work I do. I have nothing to do with Israel. I do all the work in the US. Kind of what we said was that the fact that all your clients are in the US, you're getting paid by a 1099, that's not the key point. The key point is that you're living and working in Israel. So Israel, in that case, is going to tax you. And you have to consider the Israeli taxes first, and then the US taxes after, like we spoke about. You could have an S corp set up. Sorry, that was another question. Was if you have the S corp set up and how that's going to get you out of it.
I think I would kind of divide the questions that we got into 3 sections. One is really well worthwhile getting a consultation. So that's someone who's already has an S corp, already has an LLC. They're trying to determine how they should divide up their wages here and there and what they should do with that. I think that's a great case for talking to Aliyah or I or any of the many other experienced US CPAs and EAs in Israel. Then there were questions where no amount of consulting is going to give you a good answer because they're just not great ideas. So one of them was keeping your Israeli-based business while you're doing all the work from the US. It's just you're opening yourself up to Israeli taxes. Extra double tax is not a great idea. And the other one is staying on payroll that doesn't match your location. So if you're working for a company that has both US and Israel payroll options, like they have at least branches in both places, you ideally want to be getting paid through the branch or entity that matches the country where you're living. Otherwise, you're going to open yourself up to double taxation because you'll have to try to claw back taxes from one place or the other. It's just not a great idea. Definitely worth trying to just get it that you're getting paid by payroll in the country where you're living. And then we have in the middle, we have things where it's, most of our situations are, let's say you're getting a 1099 which is a contractor. 1099 is independent contractor, not technically your employer, although some people use that language. And that's self-employed. You're self-employed in the US. You keep paying self-employment tax to the US. You also need to pay your taxes to Israel because you'll be sitting in Israel, presumably you'll be working from Israel. So you pay your regular income taxes from Israel and Bituach Leumi and other, taxes similar to self-employment tax. And then you also have the situation where you have a US-based employer. The employer has no Israel-based entity, doesn't want an Israel-based entity. And I think there are some situations there where it's not so straightforward, but there are things to be said for not rocking the boat. We want you to be employed, and we understand that in order to do that, you might not want to fiddle too much with the situation you're in. So those are situations, both being 1099 or being an employee of a US entity, you're going to need to get an Israeli accountant and open some tax files in Israel and report to Israel for the income you're earning while you're sitting here. Usually not double taxation, but Social Security, Medicare, as we said, sometimes state taxes, there can be double tax there.
Okay, so I want to address, and people can re-ask questions on those topics if it's still not clear. I think we kind of covered that in general. Just have to give a good summary. I want to address the questions people are asking about IRAs, Roth IRAs, 401ks, and how does Israel tax all of these different funds. So the idea is that, like we said, the first 10 years, it's completely exempt from Israeli tax. That's the 10-year tax exemption. So that I think is pretty clear. People ask what happens after 10 years. Now, after 10 years, and I'm going off the assumption that these are retirement accounts that were all funded while you were living and working in the US. If when you're living in Israel, you're continuing to fund Roth IRAs with your Israeli income, that's more complicated, out of scope for this conversation. But assuming you're making Aliyah with your Israeli pensions, you're making Aliyah with your US pensions, after the 10 years, the US says that that these accounts will be taxed to Israel at the rate that they would be taxed to the US. And it's a little bit complicated, and Israeli accounts have different approaches on how to run the calculation. The bottom line is that the tax to Israel will not be higher than the tax that you would be paying to the US if you still lived in the US, or the US when you're reporting it to the US. So for the Roth IRA, you take a distribution from a Roth IRA, there's no tax. So Israel says no tax. If you have a 401k and it's $100,000 and you have to pay $15,000 tax to the US, Israel will tax you $15,000. And you then take a credit to the US side to not have to pay double taxation. So it gets a little bit tricky, especially on the Israel side. But the bottom line, and this is really important, is there will not be additional tax even after the 10 years on any of your US retirement accounts, 401k, IRA, Roth, whatever it is, assuming it's all been funded before you move to Israel, there won't be any additional tax to Israel on them. You might have some tax to Israel, but it's lower than the tax it'll be the same or lower than what you pay to the US. Yosefa, would you like to add, or?
No, I don't want to touch that subject.
Okay, fine. Okay, fine. So I think that answered a good chunk of questions. If somebody still has a question on the pension 401k, please feel
I
free
saw
to
a
ask.
lot of questions. I don't know about that subject. I saw a lot of questions related to I'm claiming my soldier child as a dependent, various things about claiming dependents. And I think in our practice that we see so much inappropriate claiming of dependents. So you need to look at the circumstances if you're supporting your child, how much is your child making, things like that. Just because they are unmarried and maybe not filing their own taxes does not mean you can or should claim them as a dependent. And all the more so, a lot of people think if they claim their kid as a dependent, they don't have to file their own tax return. It's pretty much the opposite in many cases. So speak to an accountant who understands these things, please. If you or your kid are living in Israel, I'm answering was starting to type this, but if you or your kid are living in Israel, please just use an accountant here, or send whoever is living in Israel to an accountant here to handle this. It is not worth the risk of using an accountant who doesn't know how to file an FBAR and what questions to ask. Most of our clients don't necessarily understand what accounts they have, and it's complicated. But because we're based here, we understand, okay, you're in Israel, you've been working for more than 6 months for an employer. We know you must have this, that, and the other. So I think it's really important to have an accountant who understands how things work on the ground in Israel. Let's see. Health savings account. How does Israel treat health savings accounts? So many of these questions really are like, if you're in your first 10 years of Aliyah, it's not super relevant. They don't tax it. And I would think after 10 years, do you know anyone who's still got an HSA in their 11th or 12th year of Aliyah?
Yeah, some clients that still get it with a W-2 will get an HSA just by default. Not huge amounts usually, but they're sometimes included. I think Israel just usually kind of works off what's on the tax return, whether it's right or wrong. I think that they
Yeah.
kind of they don't deep dive into the W-2. They just look at what's on the tax return.
Yeah, really, so much of this is going to depend on your Israeli accountant. There's a right way to do it, and there's someone else's opinion of a right way to do it, and there's also the fast way that a lot of accountants will do it.
Sure. I think I'm going to start answering the newer questions first, because I don't want to go too far back in case we've answered. So I apologize if you've asked one that's old, re-ask it. And we'll go from newer with the time we have. So, distributions from a trust set up in the U.S. pay. Wait, did that just disappear? Oh, here. What about distributions from a trust set up in the U.S. pay just U.S. tax, or Israel tax the trust distribution? So, a trust would qualify for the 10-year exemption. So for the first 10 years, you don't have to worry about Israeli reporting or Israeli tax on a U.S. trust. After 10 years, you have potentially a lot to worry about, and we should discuss it. And I'll probably refer you, or Yosefa will refer you to a Israeli trust expert. There are a lot of rules on trusts. So first 10 years, don't worry. After 10 years, worry.
Yeah. How does US treat WISE account that receives, so I think, I'm not sure, does WISE have branches besides US? You need to find out where the account is. There are accounts such as like PayPal where they do have accounts outside the US. You need to find out where your account is. If you have an account that is not a US based account, that would require reporting like other foreign accounts on an FBAR and perhaps FATCA reporting form 8938, depends. But if you're just talking about the income, I think we touched on this, it doesn't really matter where you get the income. It's about how much you earned, how much benefit you earn, not about how much cash goes into one account or another, or what currency is in, or where that is. So income is income, whether it goes into WISE or your Israeli account directly. But whoever asked this question, you might want to be in touch with one of us directly about your situation, because maybe there's a better way to do it.
Sure. I want to answer Mark's question. Mark asked a few pieces here that are really important. So primary residence will remain US based because you're spending 80% of your time in the US. So first of all, there's a question of whether you're spending the majority of your time, significant time, still in the US. So you're asking the question is, are you even an Israeli tax resident? The answer might be no. You might not be an Israeli tax resident, and then we don't have to worry about a lot of the Israeli tax situations. However, it's also possible you are deemed an Israeli tax resident. There are various factors that go into Israeli tax residency. So it's possible that even if you're only in Israel 20% of the time, if your family's here, your home is here, other situations, you could still be an Israeli tax resident and have to consider Israeli taxes. In that case, the fact that you are only earning U.S. self-employment income, that doesn't mean, like we said, the fact that you're only earning U.S. self-employment income, if you're doing work in Israel, you still have to report what you earned in Israel. Now, it could be that 80% of your income is being earned while you're in the US, so a lot of your income could be exempt. But the fact is, you still might have might have Israeli tax considerations.
There's an interesting question that I don't have a great answer to, but it's interesting. Anonymous writes, I plan on making Aliyah later this year, but still have a week or so before the US tax deadline of April 15th. First of all, if you're having trouble making any decisions, file an extension. There's very little, people in the US are very scared of filing extensions. Get used to it. Once you move here, you're going to be filing extensions. Am I more tax advantaged to put money for the 2024 tax year into HSA or Roth IRA, or better keep that money in non-US sheltered accounts? I don't plan on retiring for many decades. So I think this is a unique situation, but it does encompass a lot of questions other people have asked. So I think both of us usually agree that for someone who's already made Aliyah, especially in the first 10 years, in Israel, and especially if they plan to retire in Israel, that it's not worthwhile usually to put money into a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA. You agree with that?
Sorry, I was typing the answer to a question and not listening.
Trick question.
What was the
Just
question?
nod and smile.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Yeah. That if someone moves to Israel, they're within their 10 years of Aliyah and they plan on retiring to Israel, usually not worthwhile to put into an IRA. US.
Maybe there could be some factors. I want to know a little more before I
Okay.
commit to
Okay.
that.
Good point. I'm gonna go out and say at least the majority of people I talk to, there are usually better options when they're in their first 10 years and they plan to retire in Israel. But in this situation, this person has not yet made Aliyah, and that makes it more interesting. I couldn't find my crystal ball real quick, so I can't tell you for sure. But I think that it could still be advantageous to put into whatever savings plan usually benefits you. So whatever benefited you for 2023, likely still to benefit you for 2024. But I think there are a lot of benefits to stopping, like not contributing to an IRA after Aliyah, because there are some benefits to keeping your pre-Aliyah contributions separate from income that is earned, from contributions based on income that was earned post Aliyah. So it's not a deal breaker. It's not like, I'm not giving a black and white answer, but it's worth considering because there are some advantages to saying this was all earned pre-Aliyah.
I'm just going to jump in here quickly and say it's 7:03. Aliyah and Yosefa, I'll leave it up to you guys if you would like to continue and just we have 30 questions left. We'll try to get through as many as we can. But we're going to start winding down. Does that work for everyone? Okay, great.
If any questions unanswered, actually, I've got one request. For anyone that we're not going to get to all the questions, I'm sure people have follow-ups they're going to send. If you could, you want to send a follow-up email, send it to either me or Yosefa, but not both of me and Yosefa. Because we're going to get to them in the next day or two. We'll answer all your emails. But it's
I'm not getting that to all of them in the next
me
day
and
or two.
Yosefa talk, and it is frustrating when someone emails us both the exact same question. Like we're both capable to answer it, or we'll refer.
If you absolutely must, at least CC us both so we know and we can do a reply all and know that your question has been answered by one of us.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's like you're quizzing me to see, if we answer the same thing. Don't do that. Okay. Yes.
Hi, guys. Somebody just asked the question that was my question, really, because you were talking about HSAs. Somebody said, can I use the HSA funds to pay for medical expenses in Israel? I think that's a very straightforward question, but I don't want to answer it, so I want to get you guys to answer.
As far as I'm concerned, yes. There are so many things you can use your HSA for. You can use them to fill your first aid kit for the first aid package that you should be keeping in your safe room, which God willing, you will never need and not have to spend much time there. But
How do
Yeah.
you use the American-based funds to buy something like that in Israel?
Well, I haven't had a problem with my usual Israeli credit cards. I think it might depend on the bank that the HSA is through. But I think you can withdraw, I think there are ways to withdraw cash also. So as long as you're keeping track of it, as long as everything that comes out of your let's say you take $300 out of your HSA, you must spend $300 at least on qualified medical expenses, which is a really, really wide range of things. Otherwise, talk to your US accountant about that. But generally, as long as you're spending it on qualified medical things, keep the receipts. But I don't have a problem with it. Ellie, any concerns there?
Not that I can think of now.
And you're going to have fewer, God willing. You'll have, you're not going to have all the copays and stuff that you're having. God forbid, if you do end up in the hospital, you'll go to the front desk and say, hey, how much do I owe you? And they'll laugh in your face and you'll leave. So you should expect Band-Aids are more expensive. Over-the-counter medicines are more expensive. You can use it on all that stuff, but your doctors and your hospitals and everything is going to be a lot less money. US charitable contributions, that's a good question. So first of all, it's very few of, at least my clients, itemized deductions. So generally, in order to claim charity on your US tax return as a deduction, you have to be itemizing deductions. In order to be worthwhile, you have to have enough itemized deductions. And one of the biggest things when you're living in the States, itemized deductions, is your state taxes. Usually once you move abroad, you don't have state taxes and some of your other expenses are lower. So it's less likely to be relevant. I usually say that as much as possible, give to Israeli qualifying funds. So don't give to the like American Friends of version of something, go to the Israeli version of something so you can get the Israel tax receipt, because you're most likely to get benefit if you owe, like assuming you're not retired. If you're gonna owe any Israeli taxes, you can get a lot more tax benefit there. And then if you end up itemizing deductions, assuming you're using an accountant here who understands the treaty and everything, we can still claim your Israeli to an extent, to a certain extent. We can still claim Israeli charity. Why are children who do not have US citizenship ineligible to be listed as dependents? You have to be a citizen or a resident.
I don't know why the Irish doesn't let you.
I don't know. Even if they live with you. Let's see. Did
Richard asked a question. Maybe I misspoke. Richard asked that there's a reporting requirement or a tax if our apartment in Israel is more expensive than what we sold our U.S. house for.
No, it was just
Not
an
by
example
definition of that.
of.
I was saying that if you sell some people say I'm selling my US house, but I'm buying a more expensive house, so I don't have to pay tax. And I was saying there's no automatic exemption based off of that. If you sell your house, there might not be tax based off of the exclusion or other factors. I was just saying that you don't get an automatic. In Israel, there's a law like that a lot of times where if you sell a home and then buy a new home, Israel gives you this like benefit on it. I would just point out that US doesn't do that. I think I confused you on that, so I apologize.
Right. Yeah, no, it was just an example of where it would still be taxable. Yosefa, what if we are retired? So I assume that's in relation to the charity. So you can get a deduction from your Israeli taxes up to the extent of your tax bill. If you're retired and all your income is coming from retirement accounts in the US and you're in your first 10 years of Aliyah, you probably won't have any Israeli taxable income. So then you can't really claim, you're not going to get a refund from Israel if your taxes go below zero.
Ellen, you asked about us advising / filing US Israeli tax returns. And somebody else asked about taking on new clients. Both me and Yosefa are definitely happy to handle your US tax filings. As far as the Israel reporting goes, the way that my firm handles things, we have an affiliate Israeli accounting firm that works as they sit in our office once a week. I'm very familiar with Israeli taxes, so I can advise in general kind of things to consider if you're telecommuting, how to structure things. Then we bring in the Israeli accountant when we need to kind of run more,
And we can both tell
calculations.
you almost 99% of the time, we can both tell you if you need an Israeli accountant, which sometimes is just the first step. Many people just don't need an Israeli accountant for the first 10 years here.
Right. But yeah, so we can take care of it. I say we have a one-stop solution, not one-stop shop. We can definitely, handle that together. Yeah. Okay. Ted, thank you for clarifying that about the 250 exclusion. Someone that hasn't filed in a long time, how to get caught up.
I think I answered some questions like this. I think that
The
it's
answer is
probably
email.
best
At this point, email me or Yosefa, or email both of us together, and we can both respond. But we'll get one of us will get you caught up, and we'll be able to take care of it.
Let's see.
Mike, you asked about, yes, so the Social Security and the Roth IRA both not being taxable. Essentially, yes, that's true. There are slightly different reasons for it. Social Security, we take a treaty-based position on the U.S. side, so that the U.S. says if you're living in Israel, the Social Security benefits are tax-free to the U.S. Israel just says Israel says Social Security benefits are tax-free as well. The Roth IRA, by its nature, the U.S. It doesn't tax you on distributions from a Roth IRA. And the U.S. and Israel says we'll tax you at the same rate on IRAs as the U.S. was taxed you, and because the U.S. taxes you 0 on a Roth, we also will not tax you on a Roth. So, bottom line, yes, if your only income is Roth IRA and Social Security benefits, sounds like no tax anywhere.
Okay, I'm going to answer Sonia's question. We're both retired. We receive Social Security and pension in the US. We plan to still keep our condo in Florida. We are renting in Israel, but it is including Vad Habayit and Arnona. I'm not sure if that comes in the question. I didn't catch it, so clarify. I'm going to assume that the condo in Florida will be rented out. So that would be rental income. We pay taxes in the US. Will we be responsible for any taxes for the first 10 years in Israel? What form do we need for our American Social Security not to be taxed in the US? So based on just the income that you've mentioned, no, I don't see anything that needs to be reported to Israel in the first 10 years of Aliyah. And there's no specific form that you get from Social Security. It's a form that goes with your tax return usually. It's form 8833. Did I get that right? It's getting late. 80, right? 8833? It's a treaty statement. You're reporting that you're reporting that you live in Israel, and this article and that article of the treaty, and this subchapter XYZ, and this is why you are exempt. If you hire almost any qualified US CPA or EA in Israel, they're going to know and how to do it, hopefully. How to avoid double taxation on stock investments. Not to toot our own horn, but using accountants who know what they're doing is a really good start to make sure you're taxed in the right place, the right time. In your first 10 years of Aliyah, assuming this is still relevant, usually you're going to get better tax treatment if you leave your stuff in the US. You'll be much less likely to accidentally invest in something that is not good for US citizens. You'll probably have much lower management fees than Israeli stuff. After 10 years, you'll have to start reporting it to Israel, so then you can see if it's still relevant. There shouldn't be double taxation. Different elements of investments are taxed first in different, Israel gets the first bite and some the US gets the first bite. So ideally, you're using a US accountant and an Israeli accountant who coordinate and can make sure that everything is taxed once, not more, not less.
We have a few questions about if Israel has a tax day and when are taxes due. So one of you just quickly address that.
So in the US, for US taxes, each individual person needs an extension, right? So we're filing hundreds of extensions, one for every single client. In Israel, if the accountant files a certain percentage of their taxes by a certain date, then they get an extension on everything else. I don't even remember when the deadlines were supposed to be because they've been extended so many times.
I think the key with Israel is and the US should be like this. It's less about a deadline where if you don't file by this date, there's a filing penalty. It's more just pay your taxes that you have to, if you don't pay your taxes on time, they charge you interest. And it's not like a crazy amount of interest. I don't think. So it's more, it's not like one specific date that like you have to file by or else something, terrible is going to happen. It's more like, you should be paying your taxes throughout the year. If you're, let's say you're working, for, you're earning a W-2, but doing all your work in Israel. So you have to pay all your tax to Israel. You should make, they're called mikdamot, estimated payments. You should make them throughout the year. And if you don't, then in January the following year, February the following year, make the payments. There'll still be some interest. The longer you wait, the more interest there is, but there's not like one magical date for Israeli taxes.
Yeah, and which is also can be annoying when you're trying to file your US taxes and you're waiting for your Israeli taxes, and much more relaxed about that. Someone asked, does anyone give up US citizenship to avoid double taxation? Legally, no. Practically, yeah, of course. But I don't think you're allowed to say you're, I mean.
Wait, one, yeah, no, disagree with that. There are
Yeah?
cases where people, sure. Somebody with a huge amount of stock options that don't have any valuation yet before they go public. I've had that with a couple clients where they'll know that they don't actually have the value yet of something. Or by the way, somebody with a US citizen with parents or grandparents with large assets that they're going to leave to them. They might say, okay, we realize that right now we don't have much income or much assets, but we are going to in the future. So they'll give up their US citizenship because right now their financial situation is fairly simple. In the future, it would be more complicated.
I agree practically. My understanding was that you're not like legally that you can't give up citizenship for tax avoidance purposes or something like that. It's
You have formally revoking the citizenship?
yeah, maybe talk to an immigration attorney.
Sure.
Practically speaking, yes. People absolutely give it up to avoid not just the taxes, but the complications of the reporting. If you commute to America to work and own a home in Israel, can you deduct the interest in your mortgage from your American tax bill? So first of all, it'd be only if you're itemizing deductions. So I guess potentially if you're spending a lot of time working in a specific US state, you could have enough state taxes that maybe it's worth it to itemize deductions. I have heard mixed things actually if you can deduct Israel mortgage interest, but my position is that you can if you're itemizing. Sure.
Unless you're saying that it's going to be, again, I'm not sure about the question, unless you're saying it's a home office in Israel and it's a business expense if you're
if they're commuting, I don't know.
Not sure.
Yeah, maybe message us privately if and when relevant with more details.
Oh, the last question was asked. That's a quick one. Can you still benefit from the refundable dependent tax credit living in Israel? Yosefa, what's the answer there?
As of today, yes, you can. Yeah, absolutely. Go for it. I mean, you need to make sure your accountant is doing things correctly. It's really common mistake that US-based accountants will claim the foreign owned income exclusion. We fix a lot of those to get people big refunds.
I'm gonna jump in here. We've now gone 20 minutes over. Thank you so much, Aliyah and Yosefa. I leave it up to you guys. You want to call it here? We answered 160 questions.
I think we should cut off more questions, but I don't mind skimming through and making sure we've answered as much as we can if that can save us a few emails later.
We appreciate all of you staying on and staying with us. We're gonna stop accepting questions to the Q&A. So any questions that come in now are going to be dismissed, and Ellie and Yosefa will skim through and see if there's anything that they can answer quickly as we finish up.
We had a couple questions about annuities. I think it's a little bit of a gray area in your first 10 years. I mean, it's not taxable in Israel in your first 10 years. I've heard both ways, whether you can use the treaty to exempt it from US taxes as well. I'm not ready to go on the record either way about that one. Are tax forms available in Israel? I'm assuming you're asking about Israel tax forms. Not that I'm aware of, but there are definitely Israeli CPAs available who speak English, and highly recommended that you use one who understands US taxes and OLEM things.
Some of them might be. I actually just this week was doing a Israeli tax form. What was it? There's one form I was doing with Mas Hakasa. They actually had it was an English form. It was for a Sharatis Taglut. And
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
you could do it in English. So there could be forms in English.
But the regular income tax forms, I'm not usually seeing in English.
Right.
If I make Aliyah in August this year, how will I be treated by Israel and the US? So I'm assuming you're still a US citizen for ever and ever. So you're still going to file federal taxes, state taxes, if relevant. You would usually file part year residency, and you would be taxed on, for example, let's say you're moving from Virginia. So you would be taxed on 100% worldwide income for the period of time you lived in Virginia, and then only Virginia source income after you move, like if you're going back to work in Virginia or if you have a rental property. And then Israel is only going to start taxing you on any relevant income from the day you move. So for Israel, you don't really need to worry about what you do between January and August.
I would also add, though, that the first year your tax to Israel is going to be a lot lower because they also prorate the income. So if you earn, $200,000 for the year, but you're only in Israel for 4 months, they're going to only look at your income as a much smaller amount. So probably less tax due to Israel for that first year.
When you get foreign tax credit, this is from Ted. When you get foreign tax credit in the US for taxes paid in Israel, for example, 401k distribution, that credit is calculated only after determining the pre-credit tax. Sorry, I didn't read this through before offering to answer it. Therefore, you will have a higher taxable income. Is that factored into determining the amount of foreign tax credit? Yes. Yes, your total income is factored into almost everything. But there are a few elements missing as far as sources and who you're paying for tax to and things like that. Oh, I said can't rock the boat. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to avoid saying, recommending any not 100% legal activity, but listen, you're making Aliyah, right? And you have a job, and maybe your immediate supervisor knows you're moving to Israel, but maybe you don't want to tell the company yet. It happens. I'm not going to say what you should or shouldn't do, but it happens. Bottom line, you need to get an Israeli accountant here, and you need to make sure taxes are being paid to Israel, at least if you're sitting here doing the work. It was in contrast, I said that in contrast to a situation where your company has an Israel branch. And in that case, just sort it out and get on payroll in Israel. Hopefully you can keep the same level of wages and the same benefits, but they should be withholding Israel tax and not US tax. How does the dependent tax credit work when you make Aliyah? Yeah, it still works, but part of the non-refundable part, sometimes you don't need it and you can't get it back. So whatever the maximum refundable credit is, that's what a lot of people are getting back 100% as their refund. But yes, you can still take advantage of that, assuming that your accountant knows how to handle that. Okay. hopefully we've gotten to everything. I know we could not read everything, but hopefully we got the gist of it.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
also like you can email me and Yosefa, together or choose one of us. And
But I may judge you if you ask us something that we answered multiple times. So keep that
I
in
don't
mind.
mind as long as you don't email me and Yosefa separately. If you
Okay.
do that and we find out, I'm not going to answer.
Yes, or CC us, so then I can see if Ellie answers first.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you so, so much, Ellie and Yosefa. Really, you answered 171 questions, which I think might be a Nefesh B'Nefesh webinar record. So really so much appreciated. As we said, you will get a recording of this webinar tomorrow, along with links to Ellie and Yosefa's emails and other resources mentioned. And we look forward to seeing you after Pesach, where we will be discussing budgeting for Aliyah. So feel free to visit our pre-Aliyah events calendar and sign up for that one. See you all
Thanks for
then,
having us.
and Chag Sameach.
Thanks, guys.